the context of everything we're talking about is quite unusual, because usually it's a demand shock that we suffer from as a business. And if it's a supply shock, in the last sort of 30, 40 years, it's usually been around fuel, driven by maybe a war. The Venezuela thing didn't even move the dial. It's about actually a supply of equipment. Much harder and longer term nut to crack. Because what we've seen is where we've had demand shocks, the business has sprung back very quickly. 2002 was a stellar year after 9/11. It bounces back. The fuel price, if it goes down, we're back making money. But this is a much more complex, longer term problem that, as we said at the start, is in some ways is getting to the end in terms of the Boeing being allowed to produce more aircraft, the overall deliveries being back to, getting back to levels, 2018 levels or whatever. But those delays, as we kind of been saying, have caused consequential delays in engines, in maintenance, which could go beyond, the 2030 window. So this is going to run and run. And some airlines, as we said, are better placed than others to insulate themselves against the problem. And network decisions, these are big decisions to take, and whether every airline or many airlines will have the options. Some will, some won't. So this is a very tricky time, and not something that I think the industry has seen for ever, really, because usually the shocks have been sharp and deep, but then we've recovered. This is much more of a U.
First of all, about this point related to being sold out by 2035, I mean, based on unconfirmed rumors, because this is obviously a private information, we have a new commodity in the industry, which is basically a ticket in the line of when you get your aircraft, and just like slots are, becoming tradable more and more, airlines are jumping the queue or giving up their place in the queue in exchange for, immediate cash, right?
Well, those positions, that's what they're called. That's been an industry for years.
It's complicating things even more and making this divide between the haves and have-nots, so much bigger.
The other thing that we should be looking at is indeed intermodal, and especially in areas such as Europe, where the rail network is quite extensive. And I saw a post on LinkedIn as somebody actually, an influencer actually did a time measure about how long it took from Edinburgh to London by the train and flying, and basically flying was 8 minutes shorter because of all the hassle of the airport and those kind of things. So shouldn't be focusing more on promoting intermodal transportation, and how can we take away those hurdles, especially the connections that we have between rail and air? How can we take them away? And then that brings me, for example, to our friends American Airlines and Landline that have airside bus connections. So for regional flights with bus rides up to 3 hours, they now do it by bus rather than a regional jet, which, by the way, is something also very interesting, because especially in the US, you have a lot of the Embraer 145s, even 135s flying around, and the CRJs. What's going to happen when these aircraft reach the end of their life? There is no replacement. And indeed, we don't see in this. We see that the airlines need to make very important decisions on where to deploy their capacity. And I think this could, when we talk about network, this really should be driving two things. One, consolidation within the industry, because we're always touting about how good we're doing and we need more planes. But let's face it, we're at 85% load factor, which means that 15% of the seats that we're flying around is empty. They're empty. So we're actually not doing a great job. So we actually should be consolidating more. We should get rid of a lot of the duplicate flying, which means more code shares, more alliances, more JVs, more mergers. And this is, I think, one of the things that it's, again, here we're hitting a regulatory roadblock, that a lot of governments worldwide are very wary of mergers, of JVs, for competition purposes. The question is this really a big issue? Is there really not enough competition? And I think it's fair to argue, especially on longer haul routes, there is plenty of competition, and even on shorter haul routes, there's plenty of competition between the low cost, ultra low cost, and the network carrier.